The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Mark. When the Pharisees with some scribes who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus, they observed that some of his disciples ate their meals with unclean, that is, unwashed hands. For the Pharisees and, in fact, all Jews do not eat without carefully washing their hands, keeping the tradition of the elders. And on coming from the marketplace, they do not eat without purifying themselves. And there are many other things that they have traditionally observed, the purification of cups and jugs and kettles and beds. So the Pharisees and scribes questioned him, "Why do your disciples not follow the tradition of the elders, but instead eat a meal with unclean hands?" He responded, "Well did Isaiah prophesy about you hypocrites, as it is written, 'This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines human precepts.' You disregard God's commandments, but cling to human tradition." He summoned the crowd again and said to them, "Hear me, all of you, and understand. Nothing that enters one from outside can defile that person, but the things that come out from within are what defile. From within people, from their hearts, come evil thoughts, unchastity, theft, murder, adultery, greed, deceit, licentiousness, envy, blasphemy, arrogance, folly. All these evils come from within, and they defile." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. From within people, from their hearts, come evil thoughts, unchastity, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, licentiousness, envy, blasphemy, arrogance, folly. All these evils come from within, and they defile. These are harsh words that Jesus says to us today. It should make us all stand up straight and listen. It should all, in our own internal forum, begin to lead us to ask questions. But how is it that this is a truth for me? Because at the end of the day, it is a truth for us all. All of us fall prey to these sins from time to time. And it's important, though, when faced with this, to actually begin to ask ourselves, why is this true? Why is it that when my own insecurities of pride and arrogance, or hatred and intolerance, power and envy strike, that we get a little weak at the knees? Why is it that that takes place? And certainly on one hand, we could say this is good old-fashioned sin. That's what causes this. Another is our own discipline to the spiritual life. It's important for us to reflect upon our own discipline in that regard, because at the end of this Mass, you'll be faced with one of four options. Go forth, the Mass is ended. Go and announce the gospel of the Lord. Go in peace, glorifying the Lord with your life, or simply go in peace. But sometimes we choose the fifth option that has not been approved by the bishops. Go forth to breakfast and get along with the rest of your day. Mass is ended for the week. And if you don't believe me, go to a parish sometime and pay attention to how fast people drive out of that parking lot. It's almost like they're merciless NASCAR drivers. But I digress. Recently, I read a quote from John Paul II that he had written in an encyclical called Pastoris Dabo Vobis. Pastoris Dabo Vobis in English means "I will give you shepherds." And John Paul II, as he was reflecting on our culture, said something interesting. He said, "Material well-being, which is so intensely sought after, becomes the one ideal to be striven for in life. As a result," he said, "there is a refusal of anything that speaks of sacrifice and a rejection of any effort to look for and to practice spiritual and religious values. He then goes on to say, and I think this is the most important piece of this quote, that all determining concerns for having supplants the primacy of being. And I think that's an important quote to reflect upon, that we have confused having with being. With people as created by God, there is really very little that we can ask for beyond our basic needs. But yet, we have taken on this mentality of having to have so much more. So if we were to think about this in a different way, all right? If we were to use the Spark Notes version of this, we would say, we have confused having with being. But then go on to say, this decision is so completely contrary with our DNA, it messes us up. It leads us into what it is that Jesus is talking about in the gospel. That we are hardwired, literally, to receive God's love and to share it. That's what we're hardwired to do. We're literally hardwired to receive it, to share it, and to exist, to be in that love that God has given us. But when we begin to truncate that approach and to be more focused on a sense of self-worth that comes from having, from accumulating things, whether they be friendships, material possessions, power, success, the list goes on, then we begin to short circuit. Then we begin to manifest these sins that Jesus speaks about in the gospel. I look at it as a spiritual equivalent of the book and documentary Super Size Me. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with this, but this young man back in 2004 went on a binge of eating McDonald's every single day for an entire month. And as a result of that binge, he gained 24.5 pounds, his cholesterol skyrocketed, he had all these types of physiological effects. He literally worked against his body. And the tragedy is that he had to spend the next year trying to get his body back. What Jesus is asking of us in this gospel, I believe, is to essentially play to our nature, to live in God's love and to share it. And that is the beauty of our Christian message. Because this Christian message that we so boldly proclaim is that our focus is not in having, it's in being. It's in looking our eyes towards the heavens and recognizing that there are objective truths and realities that we abide to. And it's in searching after those objective truths and realities that we are transformed, that we are made men and women who can glorify the Lord with our lives. So my brothers and sisters, on this day, let us be aware of those times in which we confuse being with having, because it is only by being present to the Lord that we are able to share that love. It is only by being present to God that we are able to truly be alive in the way that we hope. These words from Moses in our first reading should ring clear. Now, Israel, hear the statutes and decrees which I am teaching you to observe. Observe them carefully, for thus you will give evidence of your wisdom and intelligence to all nations, who will hear all of these statutes and say, this great nation is truly a wise and intelligent people. My brothers and sisters, let us continue to proclaim those truths. Let us continue to search after them, not settling for a life that is only half lived, but living for a life that's firmly rooted in God.